Hey guys, it's Dan from Beatmatch Guru, and today we're going to be talking about how to use the EQ effectively when you're DJing, and I'm going to give you 5 tips. So, what is EQ? EQ is essentially the different types of frequencies that you can change on each channel of the mixer. Now, each mixer has 3 knobs. So the first knob is high, mid, and low. So we've got 3 options to control the frequency. The high frequency is controlling the cymbals and the hi-hats, all of the high frequencies that you can hear really high pitch in your ear. The mid controls are more like synths and pianos, so you can dial that down or you can dial that up. The low frequencies are very prominent, so these are more sub and bass frequencies that you can hear when the bass line is playing in the first chorus or the verse. And what you can do is control these individual frequencies by dialing down or taking away the frequency or adding to it slightly. Now, there are other options that you can have in DJ controllers as well. So they have you'll see below the low frequency, sometimes you'll see LPF/HPF. What that means is you can turn it down and it just plays the audio for that channel as a low pass frequency. So LPF stands for low pass frequency, and if you turn that up, it's high pass frequency. Now, a lot of EDM DJs like David Guetta use that a lot, and they use it to turn it down to LPF, and you can only hear really low sub frequencies, and they usually hype up the crowd with the microphone. Okay, so that's a quick rundown of what EQing is. Let's go into the 5 tips, okay? So tip number 1 is when I'm DJing, I sometimes use 2 variations. So sometimes I use full kill switch. So what I mean by that is that I'll quickly switch the low pass filter to really low really quickly. And that is in a specific type of mix that I'm doing. So if I'm about to drop in track A when I'm playing track A already, so track B I'll bring in, and then track A I'll quickly cut out the bass to let the bass line come through on track B. So it's as simple as that. Part 2 of tip 1 is the gradual effectiveness of using an EQ filter. So what you can do is just gradually build that in. So you may be filtered out the high pass, and you may be slowly bringing that in. And my advice is there, if you're doing that, then counteract it with the frequencies of the other track as well that you're mixing into, because you don't want the 2 channels to clip. And you'll see that on the channel volume. If it goes into the red, then you need to counterbalance that for the other track that you're doing the high pass for. So that's really good control if you can keep it out of the red when you're doing that. So tip number 2, there's one trick that DJ Andy C does, and I'm sure a lot of other DJs do it as well, and I really love it. It's one of the first things I learned when I was watching other DJs such as Andy C. And what he does is when he double drops tracks, and when I mean double drop, I mean 2 bass lines like hit the drop on the chorus at the same time. What he does is switch between the 2 low filters on both tracks. And what it sounds like is like he's like sort of beat juggling with the bass lines of the 2 tracks. So he's cutting in one bass line and then he's cutting in the other. So it might be on 2 beats or it might be on 4. It's usually 4, but you can do it on 8 as well. So it's just sort of a creative aspect to using the EQ to play around with the sounds, which is really cool. So try it out. The third point for EQ and using it effectively is that you can switch down the low and you can switch down the high. So you've only got like the percussion sounds and the hi-hat cymbals, and you can gradually bring that into the mix. And what that is, when I use that, is usually when you've got like a really good percussive track and you can hear like sort of the bongos or something, and you can just hear the top end of the bongos. And what you can do is it's really good because you can bring it in and it will stand out in the mix if you've timed it right with the correct phase a phrase, or if you're doing it on the build up in the middle of a track. So that's always really good. But remember, when I said at the beginning, you have to counteract the other EQ side, so you're blending in so it doesn't go too high in volume and you go into the red. So keep that in mind. So tip number 4 is older tracks. So older tracks you might find aren't as loud or as clear in the frequencies that they've been recorded to or mixed down and mastered. So my advice is to understand the music that you're mixing. Pick out the tracks that are older, sort of classic tracks, maybe dance tracks or hip hop, or especially hip hop actually, or dance tracks from back in the 90s. So make sure you're aware of which ones have lower frequencies, and before you start going into the mix, maybe preset them slightly higher or adjust the mid or the high because they may be a bit muffled. So that's tip number 4. So the last tip number 5, is to set the levels to 0 for the next track that you're going to mix in. So I've done this plenty of times when I'm practicing at home, say I'm playing track B is live, playing out through the speakers, and then I've gone on to track A and I've got the low and the mid turned all the way down, and I've mixed in the track and I've made that mistake, and it didn't actually sound very good because all of the EQ knobs were facing down. So make sure you put them back to 0 or back to neutral before you start mixing in the new track. Just take your time and remember to do that well. So there have been 5 tips for using EQ effectively, so I hope you can take those on board and become better at DJing with these simple EQing tips. Now, on beatmatchguru.com, I have an article that gives you 11 tips that you can read and learn and practice. So why don't you click on the link below and see some more tips about EQing. So thanks for your time, guys. Get DJing.